Well, now let's head to the classroom where matriculants will be writing their final exams in just 28 days. For pupils, this time of the year comes with a lot of stress and anxiety. And so how should they deal with that? They're completing the curriculum and they've had the stresses of the pandemic. Let's speak to education specialist, Professor Mary Metcalfe. Professor Metcalfe, thank you so much for joining us. You've been through this with teachers and pupils for many years without a pandemic. The stresses this year must be enormous.
Absolutely. And I think that what we need to do as a country is to recognize in a very sober way that this is not going to be just an issue for 2021, but for years ahead. The impact of the lost learning time is going to be putting stress on the whole system. Now, if you look at last year, for example, the grade 11s only returned to school after the March lockdown in early July. So the grade 11s of last year, who now the grade 12s of 2021, had less opportunity to prepare for the matric. Now, constantly as a country, I argue that we need to get the NSC into perspective of the system as a whole. Individuals writing the matric this year need all the support that they can get, and we need to talk about how we can give that support. But if we're going to be improving the matric results year on year or maintain our gains in matric results year on year, every year to 2030, we need to give as much attention to all of the grades, because the grades that lost 6 months of last year have lost significant learning. That catch-up is not a sprint. It can't be done quickly. We have to be able to nurture and care for our learners across the whole system.
Prof, because of the pandemic and because so many people haven't had access to the internet to do online learning, will the standard be lowered as such and the exams possibly made a little easier to keep that in mind and make sure that that's sort of taken into account?
That cannot happen for the matric, for the National Senior Certificate. It can happen for the other grades, is that we need to be able to be responsive to where learners are. But for the matric certificate, the National Senior Certificate, learners need to be able to hold up their certificate and say, I got my certificate in 2020 or 2021 or 2022, but it has the same value as any other year. So Umalosi, the body which has the responsibility of quality assuring the DBE's National Senior Certificate, has to hold to the same standards that have been applied in any other year. And I think we need to support them in that commitment, because we need to be able to say our National Senior Certificate is reliable, it withstands scrutiny. Doesn't matter in which year you get it, you can trust that it is of a credible quality.
Prof, I still feel ill with anxiety when I think about matric exams, and I wasn't dealing with COVID-19. Have you got any tips out there for matrics on how to manage some of that anxiety, set up timetables, being kind to yourself, exercising, anything that you can just help them and their parents with?
That's an interesting question, because it is a time of extreme anxiety for young people. It's one of the first times where they have to put themselves out there objectively within the nation in terms of performance. You know, you can be doing well in your school, but now you are competing, and not competing because it's not a competition, but you are being judged against a national standard. So I suppose for learners, there's three things. Managing yourself in relation to your work, managing yourself in relation to your own health, which you've touched on, and managing yourself in relation to your own personal growth and self-awareness. So in terms of work, clearly, as far as I can see, schools have gone out of their way and worked extraordinarily hard to support learners. school break this week in public schools, but many schools are running spring camps supporting learners. Now, what it means is that in planning your work, you need to be guided by the past papers. You need to take advantage of initiatives such as Water Matric. So have a clear understanding of what work needs to be covered and manage yourself in terms of practicing bringing from your memory what you think you know, because that's what happens in the exam. You've got to retrieve it from your memory. So do a lot of talking to yourself, explaining to others, even telling your relatives what it is that interests you in this topic and that topic. So you rehearse them, the telling of what you know. The second thing that you touched on is you've got to manage your health and your own socio-emotional health. Lots of learners are getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning because at that time the house is deserted. They're working late, but you've got to manage your sleep patterns so that you have a place to study, that your family is supporting you, and that you're not having such badly disrupted sleep patterns, sleeping patterns, because that stability of health is so crucial as you go into this difficult time. And lots of learners miss that and don't perform as well as they should because they've been so disrupted. And managing your emotional health.
All right.
Everybody's anxious.
Thank you so much, Professor Mary Metcalfe, who's an education specialist, with some tips there on how to manage the stress of writing the upcoming matric exams.